So I had some technical difficulties, and now I am back with the next portion of this video. Um, okay, so let's get into it, shall we? So, what are some areas of change that might surface for you if you have Uranus and Gemini making an aspect, a significant aspect, with your personal planets? Okay, so what I mean by personal planets, if you see my camera moving a lot, it's part of the technical difficulty I'm having. But yeah, so personal planets would be your sun, your moon, your Mercury, your Venus, or your Mars. And since Uranus is a slower moving planet, I like to give it somewhere around 0 to about 5 degrees of an aspect, of making an aspect with one of your personal planets. Except for the moon. With the moon, I think a further degree away is fine. So anywhere between 0 to maybe like 8 degrees with the moon. You probably will feel if it's a significant aspect in astrology, you will notice some different changes in your life. So without further ado, I will first start with Uranus, okay? Or sorry, I will first start with your natal sun. So if you have Uranus and Gemini making a significant aspect with your natal sun, and this is like, like I said, it really depends on your sun sign, other areas that could be affecting you in your life, but just for um, the rule of just, it is coming in contact with your sun sign, meaning, what sun you were born into. And you have Uranus making a aspect within the 0 and 5 degree mark. Um, I came up with some changes or shifts that you might notice in your self-esteem. So your self-expression will probably show up in that. Maybe even like your self-identity could be some things to note if you are having a major Uranus Sun aspect happening with Uranus moving into Gemini, and say you are a sun in Gemini or a sun in Sagittarius or a sun in Pisces or a sun in Virgo. um, you might notice a different way in which you express yourself, or just, maybe just, you know, it's not, I don't want to scare anyone. I will put that out there first, but it's not uncommon to experience maybe some sort of like crises, or like a physical crisis, or like a traumatic experience that changes you. Um, Uranus is, after all, the planet of change and kind of shock, and sort of the things that come up in our lives that shifts our whole identity that we, just didn't see coming. Okay. There could be maybe starting your own business, becoming a boss, career shifts, moving up or down. Um, would be of, notable influence, big changes with that, just your, I think your overall role, in the world, you start to notice a big shift with that, more responsibilities, or just being more just seen as, have made a big change in your life. You start to you start coming out as becoming yourself more. I feel like with Uranus making a major aspect with your sun, you start to, you know, like big things start happening. Maybe all your life you thought you were one way or one sexual identity, and you completely realize that you no longer wanted to identify with that sexual identity, or that just didn't fit you. Rather you identified more with being a woman or being a man, although you were born one um sexual orientation, you completely swapped it. um Changing your name, would be a major thing, where you just all of a sudden you're like, I no longer identify with this name. I want to be called, say you were called Chris your whole life, and you had this shift, like this mental, you have to think about uh Uranus being in Gemini. It's very cerebral. So, it's like, okay, in my mind, I don't want to be called that anymore. It just does not fit with who I am. It does not fit with how I identify myself. So, now I want to be called Steve or whatever. We've already talked about, jobs. Maybe you want to, you decided you wanted to start your own business. It could perhaps maybe a business on the internet, but just sort of coming out as your own, and not wanting to be in the box of, working for a corporation, or working the regular 9 to 5 like everyone else. You just have this really big shift in I apologize, you might hear some noises going on. I'm recording this on the weekend when I have my kids, whom I refer to as my roomies, home. But so yeah, so you may decide, like, it's time for me to break out and just do my own thing. I don't want to be in the box of going into an office, or having a boss that I have to answer to anymore. So major transitions with career, I think, would be something you start to notice, or even things you start becoming more, again, Uranus is in Gemini. It might be still just on the mental plane, or maybe you started it with Uranus and Taurus, where it's more, tangible, and now, Uranus and Gemini comes along and it shifts completely to online or something. So that is it for you if you are having Uranus and Gemini making a significant aspect to your natal sun. Now we are going to move on to if Uranus and Gemini is making a significant aspect with your natal moon. So this would be your moon sign. So if you know us a little bit about astrology, this is the sign that the moon was in when you were born. And I kind of give this a further out orb, maybe 0 to like 8 degrees. Uranus right now, newly into Gemini, is still at that critical 0 degree mark. So, say for instance, if you have a moon sign in Gemini or Sagittarius or Virgo or Pisces, and you are having this happen, you're having Uranus making an aspect with these, or I want to also add in there, I guess more of like a earth moon. So like, would I want to add, for right now we'll just keep it um the Gemini, if you have a Gemini moon, a Gemini um or a Sagittarius moon, a Pisces moon or a Virgo moon. I kind of want to add Capricorn in there, a Capricorn moon, as well as a Taurus moon, but that's to be debated. Okay. So, anyhow, if you are having, Uranus and Gemini making a significant aspect with your moon sign, okay. So, shift in your relationship status, like going from single to married, having a child, becoming pregnant, is like a major shift, with Uranus and Gemini coming in contact with your moon sign. Moving for the first time far away from your family, maybe you've always lived in the same city with your family, and then all of a sudden you make this huge, move, like where you have to either travel hours or travel through by plane or something just to go visit them, so making a significant move away from family. Also, leaving a significant community that you have been a part of for years that felt like family, that's a significant, Uranus, I think, will bring, Uranus rules communities, and if you're having a significant Uranus transit happening, sometimes you have like this breakthrough of, do I even belong? Sort of like a feeling dealing with the moon, do I even belong in this group anymore? Does this group help me sort of, does this group meet my emotional needs? Are they aligned with where I am and who I see myself as today? So you could leave a significant community, or you could join a significant community that will have a major impact on your life. Relationship changes we've already talked about, like getting married or getting a divorce, parenting, sometimes parenting multiple children, needing more emotional freedom. The ability to feel how you feel and be okay with it is a huge thing. I think if you are having Uranus and Gemini make a significant aspect with your moon sign, Uranus can symbolize sort of like rebellion, or just a sense of like, I need to be okay to feel how I feel and you know, not have to answer to it, in a sense, like be okay with it. So you crave more of like an emotional freedom, or just like a liberation from certain feelings, or how you feel about certain things. So you could also have, this could be a significant time where if you have adult children, you see them moving out or moving on with their lives, like getting married or going to college, or just, you become like an empty nester. You see, sort of like, all of a sudden you have this sense of like, um, a big shift in your identity, and just, as maybe, your kids were always at home with you, and you felt like, okay, I'm the mom, and now you feel more like, you have this different role to them. And I'm not saying, you know it's debatable as to, okay, I'm not like, saying yes or no if you can come home at this time or leave at this time. Now they are adults and they have their own homes and roommates, and so you tend to see them more as their own individual person, your child. So the child parent dynamic takes on a completely different shift, if Uranus and Gemini is making a significant aspect to your natal moon. Shifts around relationships with women, mothers, or like mother figures. I also noticed, when I was doing research or just looking at this aspect, losing family members. There could be deaths in maternal, paternal relatives or the bloodline. Was something that I noticed as well with significant Uranus transits. Also, working from home was another one. Uranus can bring about sort of this desire, as we talked about, a little bit more so different from the Uranus conjuncting your natal sun, but more of like wanting to be in the home more, wanting to do things around the home more, whether that is buy a new home or move to a new home, or just, you have sort of like this shift in that need to facilitate change around the home. So let's move on to if Uranus in Gemini is making a significant aspect to your natal Mercury. Um, right out the top, I thought publishing a groundbreaking new book, right? Like Uranus is in Gemini, it sort of rules writing and um just the details of just creating something that you can read. It gives very like cerebral energy already. So I could definitely see with a significant Uranus transit to your natal Mercury, publishing, writing, becoming an author, or even having a sort of like this, all of a sudden, this mental stimulation to even want to do that, and having like, it's almost like your mind creating the space and creating the time and you putting it all together. This is Uranus with the mind. um being careful, or sorry, I put this down because I think this is super important. Like, Uranus is in Gemini now, and Gemini is a Mercury ruled planet, and one of the areas that Mercury rules is transportation. And especially with hard Mercury aspects, I think happening with this transit, I just put, be careful with that. And if you don't know your natal chart, please try to get to understand it a little bit more or reach out. My information is in the description box. I'm always open to helping people understand astrology, as I didn't have that opportunity. And I think it's so important to know how certain things are affecting you in your natal chart, or, the people we love. So, yeah, so definitely be careful with transportation. I also put a mental breakdown or a mental breakthrough with Uranus and Gemini, making a significant aspect with your natal Mercury. And I think, let's see if I had another one. Oh, another one I thought was really cool. Maybe you finally learn how to speak a different language. I just see that, again, this being a very cerebral time, and, all of a sudden you feel you have the mental space to learn a different language and to learn to speak a different language. And so I can definitely see this being a Uranus and Gemini, um, touching down with a major aspect like your Mercury bringing on. So now let's move on to if Uranus and Gemini is making a significant aspect with your natal Venus. Okay. So, changes in your love nature, right? Right off the bat. I know we talked about it a little bit with Uranus and Gemini making a significant aspect with your natal sun, but maybe you start noticing that you have a completely different orientation, sexual orientation, in terms of who and just what you find attractive. This might be an opportunity for you, like sapiosexuals out there. Um, because again, it's just a very cerebral time. You start experimenting and letting your love nature become more curious. Gemini is a very curious energy. And so you might start noticing, and if Uranus is making a significant aspect with your natal Venus, that you are more open to, just different forms of love and sexual styles and things like of that nature. So yeah, so watch out there, guys, that's having this transit. You could possibly have a lot of money out of nowhere, right? Or lose a lot of money. So Venus is one of those areas of our life that rules money and talks about money, not just relationships. And so I think, start to notice, um, things around that nature. If you do have Venus making a significant, or Uranus and Gemini making a significant aspect with your natal Venus, and you're like, oh my God, I played the lottery. Now, I'm not saying you're going to win the lottery, but, I would say definitely check and see, like, what is Uranus doing in my life? I had no idea this was coming in. This was all of a sudden, and then boom. So, significant areas of communication might start becoming sort of like aesthetically pleasing to you. Like, I feel that I can see this being a very Uranus and Gemini thing. Like, certain sounds. I often was like thinking about, like, what is it? Is it the ASMR, where people just want to listen to, like listen to something and it's like aesthetically pleasing. Like, there are no words, there's just whatever, someone chewing or washing their hair or, so I just figured I'd throw that one in there for fun. You could see major shifts and changes around women in your life and women in your communities. So I saw that being something that, Venus ruling women and, Uranus ruling communities. So I would definitely pay attention to that. So now let's look at what happens if you are going to have Uranus and Gemini making a significant transit or aspect with your natal Mars, okay? In parentheses with this one, I put be careful with this one, okay? We already know Mars is the planet of aggression, tension. It shows our, like, oh, how do you say it? Like our physical, I can see the word. Anyhow, it's definitely very instinctual, and so yeah, so you want to be carnal desires even sometimes. So you want to be very careful with Uranus and Gemini making a significant planet with natal Mars. You could also become more verbally assertive too, though. I see this as Gemini being a communication sign and Mars being the action sign. And all of a sudden you just like chew somebody out, and you're like, oh my God, where did that come from? Like, I never thought that would come out of me, but it did. So you could crave more of a desire to try out different physical activities on and off the court, if you catch my drift. So yeah, so there you go. You could become more active in a creative passion you've had. Um, and you could also become more interested in a different form of working out or like exercise. Maybe your whole life you've, decided you wanted to do, you have been a runner, and Uranus comes in Gemini, and you're like, I think I want to try out something sort of where it's less impact, or maybe I want to like do group Pilates or something, but yeah, something around the physical realm with Uranus making a significant aspect with your natal Mars. Now, Uranus making an aspect with natal Jupiter, I did decide to put this one in here, and I think it's because, like I mentioned earlier, I think Jupiter is one of those, it's a little bit faster of a moving planet than, say, a planet like Saturn. So I think we do get an opportunity to sort of you know, have or feel the energy from that. I know I personally just went through that as I shared in like the part 1 section of this video. But I think, it's definitely worth looking at and looking into. So what I put, you could quite literally change your belief system, okay? Your values, could become really a thing if you have Uranus and Gemini making a significant aspect to your natal Jupiter. You could just, all of a sudden, you know, you had a mindset of, I'm this religion, I'm Christian or whatever. And, out of the blue, you do more research, you do more study, and you're like, you know what? I think I want to become a Buddhist monk. I mean, I don't know. So I think Uranus is definitely one of the planets that causes breakthroughs, as I've mentioned before. And so you may decide to, or you may get a mental kind of stimulation on learning more and diving deeper than just the basic information you might have on a particular belief or value. Um, you could quite literally change your belief systems, okay? Your values, it could be, major, like I said. You could finally take that big trip, okay? You've always wanted to, or move abroad. I know I had this happen. And I didn't think about it at the time, but Jupiter came and like has been sort of dancing around with Uranus being in Taurus. And it sort of was dancing around with my natal Jupiter for years, and I started really desiring to live abroad. Just I was just like, wow, I wonder what it would be like to live in this country. And sort of like this wanderlust almost, of just really living in a different country, and this is like that far travel. So not sort of like, the Gemini local travel, but this is like somewhere further out, so that could be something major, or just even becoming a part of a new community of foreigners, and just I thought about that, learning and seeing how they do things, whether it's speaking a different language, or taking on a belief system that they have, that is completely different from what you've ever known. But at the same time, it sort of aligns with where you see yourself authentically. So, yeah. So I think that's going to wrap it up, friends, for what I think Uranus and Gemini is here to teach us and to show us. So if you have a comment, or if you are noticing, this, like I said, Uranus is going to be in Gemini for the next 7 years. So maybe you'll come upon this video like 5 years down the line or something, and you're like, oh my God, I moved abroad or whatever, please drop in the comments, like, how has this Uranus in Gemini affected your life, or maybe, something that you've noticed, the change or the breakthrough that you might be going through. I would love to hear about it in the comments. Otherwise, I will see you again. I'm not sure what I have coming up next, but take care, be safe, enjoy this Uranus and Gemini transit. As I said, I think it is going to hopefully help us to have more fun, to be more spontaneous, to think outside the box with a little bit more of less of a rigid fixity and just a spontaneous openness to learn and to dive deeper into what we enjoy. So, peace and love, and I will see you next time.